Okay, this is the pre-roll for the Friday night Bible study for the 5th day of January 2018. First Friday night Bible study in the new pagan Roman year. And we'll be streaming live on Sabbath.tv and Facebook Live. Let's get them both turned on, and this is just the pre-roll for the moment. Let's get the stream going. Greetings to those of you watching on Sabbath.tv. Let me see if I can get our video signal up here for you. Well, let's see what's happening here. We're using some strange new software. Let's try that button right there. There you go. All right, you should have the video on screen along with the audio now on Sabbath.tv. We'll be going live on Facebook Live TV on the Sabbath Services page in just a moment. But hang on. I just remembered I've got to check a setting and make sure I'm not streaming on my home page. Yeah, sure enough, that's going to be on Sabbath service page. Okay, we're all right with that. Save and close. Let's go. Let's bring up Facebook Live. And greetings to those of you watching on Facebook Live on the... Well, hold on, it didn't make it. I signed us on for 1 minute and cut us off. Oh boy, we're off to a great start tonight on Sabbath.tv and in the recording for the archive. Bear with me, it's been a very trying week. Our network went out earlier tonight. I'll explain that in a moment. Let's see if I can do something to get our signal to cycle in again on Facebook Live. Yeah, if I do this little trick, I'll put an extra dash in there when we have something go wrong so we can restream. Let's try it again. And greetings to those of you watching on Facebook Live on the Sabbath service page. We tried to sign on a few moments ago and it glitched. We had a problem, and we are a little bit over an hour late tonight. I apologize for that. One of our network devices went out, and those of you who work with computer equipment, when a device goes out, it can really be a headache. I finally wired around it and got it. We're on for tonight. And now I'm not on the TV screen again tonight. We're going to launch right into this next chapter from the book we've been reading. We've gone through 8 chapters so far. Very interesting book. I've been hearing from a number of you on that, and thank you. I agree with you. It's indeed interesting. And those of you who, like me, who have read this book before, but a long time ago, even though you know the main stuff in it, a lot of you are telling me that for yourselves, it's like for me. You're finding this extremely interesting, revealing to go back through it again and have it revived in your mind, because there's a lot of detail here that's just fascinating. It's true. You can see the truth of it all around you, and in the encyclopedias and in history books. And listen, if I sound a little bit excited tonight, there's 2 or 3 reasons for it. One is some of you who I've invited to tune in may not have seen many of our programs before, and one of my family members too who may be tuning in. What we're covering here tonight may be very new to you, and some of you new to the program. You don't see our usual studio and our cameras, and so that makes me just a little bit nervous, because we usually do more than what you're seeing tonight. But I have good news related to that, and that's this. I will be able to get that certain software that we did a trial on that worked pretty good, that works for our camera virtual studio setup. And part of the reason for that is the company that failed on their updates for us. I don't want to say a whole lot right now till I see it in the mail. They're sending it overnight Monday. They're sending a refund. So by Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll be able to get the other software. That means we'll have our Night Watch, our World Watch program back on the air by at least next Sunday night, a week from Sunday night, maybe even Thursday night, maybe even Wednesday night of this week. So those that have been praying about that, thank you, because where they had been refusing to give me a refund for something they gave us that wouldn't work, and they kept promising they'd fix it, and then they just decided to abandon it. And they said, "Well, you're past the refund date." And I said, "Wait a minute, you guys lulled me past the refund date, claiming you'd get it fixed and all that, and you didn't." And listen, friends, some of the details I tell you on Friday night, you may say, "Why are you going into all that? Why don't you just launch into this book?" Well, because I'll put the book where it just starts from the book in a separate recording for those that just want to come and see the book. But this is a Friday night Bible study, and as God's end time apostle used to do often on Friday nights, he would give us a detailed picture of where things were in the work that God had him doing up to that moment, up to that particular Friday night, exactly where we were in terms of all kind of things, including the finances of the work and various departments in the work and so on, and that gave people, especially since at headquarters there a lot of employees would attend those Friday night Bible studies at headquarters. It would give employees a good idea of, okay, well, that's where we are on this and that, and so it helped them know how to gauge their work. All right, but for you and me, what we're going to be covering tonight here on this Friday night Bible study is, let me back up. And so, since a lot of you that tune in on the Friday night Bible studies are some of the same people who like to tune in nightly on World Watch and get the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy from someone who's been trained well in that by both Mr. Herbert Armstrong and by Gene Hogberg, who ran the World Watch, he wrote World Watch and the Worldwide News, and he headed the news department for Mr. Armstrong. It goes back to the days when we used to have United Press International teletype machines and Associated Press teletype machines, news services I'm very familiar with from the time I was 12 years old and pulling the news off the teletypes for the announcers at a 50,000 watt station in my hometown, and I'd be the night person there for them, for the news guy, for the radio announcers. When after the daytime people would leave, I'd come in. I worked for them for free and got training from the time I was 12 years old, and that kind of thing. And anyway, and then the training at Ambassador College, and with having a close personal friendship with Gene Hogberg, he kind of took me under his arm, taught me a few things, would suggest to me that I read certain books. I'd go read them, come back to him, he'd say, "Very good, Stephen. Now here, read this other one." And I didn't realize at the time how God was guiding me for some of what I'd be doing now. That's a service, just a simple service to be a help to brethren in these very, very few short days before God wraps up this thing in the latter days, the end time. We can see it coming together around us. And yes, I have hated being off, but during that time off, God stuck my nose in a few things I needed to pay attention to, and has caused me to have much more concern about our dear sister Catherine Williams, that many of you call Cat, in the Birmingham, Alabama area. Many of you in other areas now are getting to know Cat vicariously from our pictures and our talks and what's happening to her, and you're praying for her, and that's great. And let me tell you, things are beginning to stir behind the scenes that are exciting to me for Cat's sake. So and sometimes when we rally together, brethren, for another brethren who's been placed in a most distressful situation, but it's a good one that it's Cat. She's got a wonderful attitude about it. Tries to serve the other people who are in the same circumstance she's been thrust into. And all of that's very interesting. We've got to talk about that in detail sometime. I'm going to try to pull reports from... Normally I wouldn't talk about what psychiatrists say, but when they criticize their own industry, that's very interesting. I've got some reports where psychiatrists are telling you there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance And yet, that's the very issue, the very thing upon which many psychiatrists base their prescriptions and soaking people for a lot of money. They are admitting that themselves. Plus, they tell you there are no laboratory tests, no biochemical testings for determinations that are this person or that person has a mental disorder. And they have a book that has grown from just a few descriptions of mental orders to over 300 now, and many of which are put in that book when the psychiatrists get together and vote on them and create them on the spot even. And they've almost got it now to a thing where every person that walks down the street is a candidate for one of these categories of mental disorders they come up with. And some of the videos some of the organizations put out have come to be real interesting, especially when it comes to them diagnosing kids. And they've pointed out, look, kids are kids. They don't need all these labels. And, sometimes they need a good belt. But because foolishness is bound up in the heart of a kid. But to put them on this mind poison that destroys the mind, that whole thing's, shameful. And Kat's been subjected to some of that. They forced drugs on her. She tells them she doesn't want to take. And they've now, the latest thing, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, they've told her that those who have the guardianship over them have told the nursing home where she is that she can't see anybody from her church. Not her minister, not any other church members. And her minister used to go over there and conduct a mini Sabbath service for her, reading from the Bible together, singing hymns together, and rejoicing on the Sabbath and helping her remember Sabbath to Sabbath, our calling. Anyway, that may get reopened back up. I'm very happy that some of you are praying about that, and it does need prayer right now. When I say it may open back up, it's only because of you brethren. Otherwise, it's totally shut down. I was thrown out of the place last Sabbath. And, that was not very pleasant. I came home with a very heavy heart after having just a few moments to be able to see and give Kat a hug. And then hey, you're not supposed to be here. I was allowed in it just happened. I was able to be allowed in, but not for long. But I was able to give Kat a nice hug, and boy, was that nice. All right, brethren, let's go on. I'm going to switch mics for the one we usually use for the recordings for this chapter, so they'll all sound in continuity. Although I do happen to like the mic I'm using. It's a Electro Voice EV27. No, EV27. I forgot all the right numbers. But anyway, it's the one they use in a lot of public radio stations. And but I'm going to switch over to this one, the Shure microphone that we started doing the recordings in. Thank you, Brother Bear. He helped to, when this microphone broke, he sent in the money for the repair bill. And instead of repairing it, they just sent a brand new mic. So that was good. All right, here we go. Now, the United States and United Kingdom in prophecy, the U.S. and U.K. in prophecy, from the original book by Herbert W. Armstrong, God's End Time Apostle, entitled The United States and British Commonwealth in Prophecy. This is chapter 9, Israel's New Land. Oh, and you know what? I meant to not have the lower third up there when I read it, so let me switch over to that without that. The U.S. and U.K. in prophecy, the United States, United Kingdom in prophecy, from a book originally entitled The United States and British Commonwealth in Prophecy by God's End Time Apostle Herbert W. Armstrong. This is chapter 9, entitled Israel's New Land. And this is yours truly, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath. I'll be reading this aloud to you as the text for it scrolls. Here's an overview of this chapter 9. In this chapter, the subchapters are A New Homeland, Lost Israel Located, Britain's Hebrew Names, Dan, A Serpent's Trail, Serpent's trail, or is that should that be a serpent's tail? Well, we'll see. I think it's typed correctly here. Dan, a serpent's trail. Yeah, I know what that's going to say. It is a serpent's trail. Then a subchapter entitled Ancient Annals of Ireland. Queen Elizabeth on David's throne. Well, a lot of you know that already. Queen Elizabeth on David's throne. And the final subchapter of this chapter 9 is entitled The United States is Manasseh. Intro to this chapter 9. We are ready now to search out the annual location. We are ready now to search out the actual location of the lost tribes of the outcast house of Israel. We know they exist today as a nation and a company of nations, powerful, looked upon as Gentiles, and when we find them, we shall find the throne of David. Many passages of prophecy tell of these people in these latter days, prophecies not to be understood until this time of the end, prophecies containing a message to be carried to these people by those to whom God reveals it. First, fix in mind these facts. The prophet Amos wrote in the days of the 13th of the 19 kings of the house of Israel, Amos 1:1, Behold, the eyes of the Lord God are upon the sinful kingdom, house of Israel. Judah had not yet sinned, and I will destroy it, and I will destroy it, the kingdom or government, not the people, from off the face of the earth. For lo, I will command and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations, like as corn is sifted in a sieve. Yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. Amos 9, verses 8 and 9. This prophecy usually is applied to the scattered condition of the Jews, but it has nothing to do with the Jews or house of Judah, but refers to the 10-tribed house of Israel, driven to Assyrian captivity, then migrating from there and scattering among other nations before the Jews were taken to Babylon. This prophecy says that Israel, not Judah, was to be sifted among other nations, these Israelites losing their identity, yet God has protected and kept them. Yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth, God said. A new homeland. It was during this time that the children of the house of Israel were to abide many days without a king, Hosea 3, verse 4, that these people did sift through all nations is clear. Many New Testament passages indicate this, although many of them still were scattered among various nations. In the 1st century A.D., a portion of them had become established in a definite location of their own by Jeremiah's time, 140 years after their original captivity. But these Israelites who possessed the birthright eventually were to come to a new land of their own. The Eternal says in 2 Samuel 7, verse 10, and 1 Chronicles 17, verse 9, Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them. Jeremiah was commissioned to do the planting of the throne among them, that they may dwell in a place of their own and move no more. The context of the whole passage shows this refers not to Palestine, but a different land where these scattered Israelites were to gather after being removed from the promised land of Palestine, while that land was lying idle and in possession of the Gentiles. Notice carefully, After being removed from Palestine, being sifted among all nations, abiding many days without a king, losing their identity, they are to be planted in a faraway, strange land, now to become their own. And after reaching this place, they are to move no more. I believe the word there where it says, and not it, should be saying, and note it. If you'll bear with me for just a second, I'll pop the E in there, yeah. And note it. After reaching this place, they are to move no more. That is, of course, during this present world. While other prophecies indicate these birthright holders were to become a colonizing people spreading around the world, it's plain that the spreading out must be from this appointed place, which must remain the home seat of the government for David's throne. Mark this clearly. Once this place of their own was reached and the throne of David planted there, they were to move no more. Therefore, the location of this people today is the place where Jeremiah planted David's throne more than 2,500 years ago. Therefore, prophecies pertaining to this day or to the location of this people just prior to Christ's return will tell us the location of Jeremiah's planting. The house of Israel is yet to return at Christ's coming to Palestine, yet to plant grapes in Samaria, their original country. Prophecies telling where they shall in that future day migrate from will reveal the location of lost 10-tribed Israel. The two succeeding overturns of the throne, too, must be located in this same general locale. Lost Israel located. Without further suspense, let's see where prophecy locates these birthright holders, now possessing the throne of David and having received earth's richest national blessings. Remember, they are distinguished from Judah, the Jews, by various names: Ephraim, Joseph, Jacob, Rachel, the mother of Joseph, Samaria, their former home, Israel. According to Hosea 12, verse 1, Ephraim followed after the east wind. An east wind travels west. Ephraim must have gone west from Assyria. When the Eternal swore to David that he would perpetuate his throne, he said, I will set his hand, scepter, also in the sea. Psalm 89, verse 25. The throne is to be set, planted in the sea. Though through Jeremiah, the Eternal said, backsliding Israel has just justified herself more than treacherous Judah. Go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, Return, you backsliding Israel, saith the Lord. Jeremiah 3, verses 11 and 12. Israel is clearly distinguished from Judah. Of course, Israel was north of Judah while still in Palestine, but when these words were written by Jeremiah, Israel had been removed from Palestine more than 130 years and had long since migrated with the Assyrians north and west of Assyria's original location. And in these last days, messengers are to go toward the north of Jerusalem in order to locate lost Israel and proclaim this warning. So the location we now find is toward the north, also west and in the sea. The 18th verse, same chapter, says, "In those days the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel." The margin says, to the house of Israel. And they, instead of saying with the house of Israel, the margin says to the house of Israel. "And they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given for an inheritance unto your fathers. At the future Exodus, at Christ's coming, they are to return to Palestine out of the land of the north." After saying, "How shall I give thee up, Ephraim?" the Eternal, speaking through Hosea, says, "Then the children shall tremble from the west." Hosea 11, verses 8 and 10. Again, "Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the coast of the earth." Jeremiah 31, verse 8. This prophecy is for consideration in the latter days. Jeremiah 30, verse 24, chapter 31, verse 1. And this prophecy for consideration in the latter days is addressed to Israel, verses 2, 4, and 9, to Ephraim, verses 6 and 9, and Samaria, verse 5. Here is added another hint. The coast of the earth, verse 8, evidencing they are dominant at sea, and indicating they have spread abroad widely by colonization. Referring to the house of Israel, not Judah, Isaiah 49, verses 3 and 6, God says, "Behold, these shall come from afar, and lo, these from the north, and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim." Isaiah 49, verse 12. In the Hebrew, the language in which this was originally inspired, there is no word for northwest, but this term is designated by the phrase the north and the west. It means literally the northwest. The Vulgate renders Sinim as Australia, or Australia. So we now have the location northwest of Jerusalem and even spreading around the world. Hence, Israel of today, Israel of the day of Jeremiah's planting of David's throne, is located specifically as northwest of Jerusalem and in the sea. Let's locate this land more specifically. The same 49th chapter of Isaiah begins with this: "Listen, O isles, unto me." The people addressed Israel are called O isles in the first verse, and O Israel in the third verse. This term isles, or islands, is sometimes translated coastlands. The 31st chapter of Jeremiah, locating Israel in the north country, says, "I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of the Lord, O you nations, Ephraim, Manasseh, and declare it in the isles afar off." Jeremiah 39, verses 9 and 10. Again, "Keep silence before me, O islands. You, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen." Isaiah 41, verses 1 and 8. And Jeremiah 31, verse 10, the message is to be declared in the isles afar off, and is to be shouted in the chief of the nations. Verse 7. So finally today, as in Jeremiah's day, the house of Israel is in the isles, which are in the sea, the chief of the nations, northwest of Jerusalem. A coast-dwelling and therefore sea-dominant people. Certainly, There can be no mistaking that identity. Take a map of Europe. Lay a line due northwest of Jerusalem across the continent of Europe until you come to the sea, and then to the islands in the sea. This line takes you directly to the British Isles. Of proof that our white English-speaking peoples today, Britain and America, are actually and truly the birthright tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, of the lost house of Israel, there is so much we shall have space for but a small portion in this book. Britain's Hebrew names. A most interesting fact is the Hebrew meaning of the names of the British people. The house of Israel is the covenant people. The Hebrew word for covenant is berith, or berith. After Gideon's death, Israel followed the false pagan god Baal. In Judges 8, verse 33, and chapter 9, verse 4 of Judges, the word covenant is used as a proper name coupled with the name Baal. This is quoted in the English text authorized version without being translated as Baal Berith, meaning, according to the margin, idol of this covenant. The Hebrew for man is ish, or ish, in I-Y-S-H or I-S-H. In English, the ending ish, I-S-H, means of or belonging to a specified nation or person. In the original Hebrew language, vowels were never given in the spelling, so omitting the vowel E from berith, but retaining the I in its angelicized form to preserve the Y sound, we have the anglicized Hebrew word for covenant, brith. The Hebrews, however, never pronounced their H's. Many a Jew, even today, in pronouncing the name Shem, will call it Sem. Incidentally, this ancient Hebrew trait is also a modern British trait, so the Hebrew word for covenant would be pronounced in its anglicized form as Brit. As the word for covenant man or covenant people would therefore be simply British, and so is it mere coincidence that the true covenant people today are called the British, and they reside in the British Isles. The house of Israel not only was to lose its identity, but its name. It was to be called by a new name, since they no longer were to know their identity as Israel, as God said plainly in Isaiah 62, verse 2, referring to these latter days and to the millennium. To Abraham, God said, "In Isaac shall your seed be called," and this name is repeated in Romans 9, verse 7, and Hebrews 11, verse 18. In Amos 7, verse 16, the Israelites are called the house Isaac. They were descended from Isaac, and therefore are Isaac's sons. Drop the I from Isaac, vowels are not used in Hebrew spelling, and we have the modern name Saxon, or Sax's son, or as we spell it in shorter manner, Saxons. So the modern name Sax's son, S-A-A-C-S, with dropping the I, and then the word sons, or as we spell it in a shorter manner, Saxons, S-A-X-O-N-S. Dr. W. Halt Yates says the word Saxons is derived from the sons of Isaac by dropping the prefix I. Many confuse the Anglo-Saxons with the German or Old Saxons who still live in Germany. The German Saxons derive their name from an old High German word, Sahs, S-A-H-S, meaning sword or knife. These sword-carrying Germans are an entirely different people from the Anglo-Saxons who migrated to Britain. Dan, a serpent's trail. As the Eternal intended that lost Israel was to be located and found in these lost days, and was to be located and found in these last days, we shall expect some kinds of signs or waymarks to have been left along the trail, by which ancient Israel journeyed from Assyria, the land of their original captivity. Speaking to Ephraim, verse 20, the Eternal says in Jeremiah 31, verse 21, "Set you up waymarks, make the high heaps, make yourself high heaps, set your heart toward the highway, even the way which you went." In Scripture, we find the waymarks or highway signs which they set up along the road they traveled. In Genesis 49, verse 17, Jacob, foretelling what should befall each of the tribes, says, "Dan shall be a serpent by the way." Another translation of the original Hebrew is, "Dan shall be a serpent's trail." It's a significant fact that the tribe of Dan, one of the 10 tribes, named every place they went after their father Dan. The tribe of Dan originally occupied a strip of coast country on the Mediterranean west of Jerusalem. And the coast of the children of Dan, we read in Joshua 19, verse 47, went out too little for them. Therefore the children of Dan went up to fight against Leshem and took it, and called Leshem Dan, after the name of Dan their father. In Judges 18, verses 11 and 12, it's recorded that Danites took Kirjath-jearim and called that place Mahanadan unto this day. A little later, the same company of 600 armed Danites came to Laish, captured it, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father. Verse 29. So notice how these Danites left their serpent's trail by the way, set up waymarks by which they may be traced today. Remember, in the Hebrew, vowels were not written. The sound of the vowels had to be supplied in speaking. Thus, the word Dan, in its English equivalent, could be spelled simply D-N. It might be pronounced as Dan or Den, Dan or Den, or Din or Don or Dun, and still could be the same original Hebrew name. The tribe of Dan occupied 2 different districts or provinces in the Holy Land before the Assyrian captivity. One colony lived on the seacoast of Palestine. They were principally seamen, and it's recorded Dan abode in ships. Judges 5, verse 17. When Assyria captured Israel, these Danites when Assyria captured Israel, these Danites struck out in their ships and sailed west through the Mediterranean and north to Ireland. Just before his death, Moses prophesied of Dan. Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Beshem. Deuteronomy 33, verse 22. Along the shores of the Mediterranean, they left their trail in Den, Dan, and Din. Den, Dan, and Din. Irish annals and history show that the new settlers of Ireland at just this time were the Tuatha de Danans, which means, translated, tribe of Dan. Sometimes the same appears simply as Tuatha Dur, meaning the people of God. And in Ireland, we find they left these waymarks: Dan's Laugh, Dan Sour, Dan Dock, Dan Drum, Dan Eagle Bay, Don Eagle City, Dunglow, Dingle, Dunsmore, meaning more Dans. Moreover, the name Dun in the Irish language means the same as Dan in the Hebrew, judge. But the northern colony of Danites was taken to Assyria in the captivity, and thence, with the rest of the 10 tribes, they traveled from Assyria by the overland route. After leaving Assyrian captivity, they inhabited for some time the land just west of the Black Sea. There we find the rivers Dnieper, Dniester, and the Don. I'm not sure if I pronounced those correctly. Dineper, the rivers Dniester, Dniester, and the Don. Then, in either ancient or later geography, we find these waymarks: Dano, the Danin, the Danaster, the Dandari, the Danez, the Don, the Dan, and the Udon, the Uridon, down to the Danes. Denmark means Dan's mark. When they come to the British Isles, they set up the waymark names of Dundee, Dunraven. In Scotland, the Dans, Dons, and Duns are as prolific as in Ireland. And so the Serpent's Trail of Dan sets up waymarks that lead directly to the British Isles. Ancient Annals of Ireland. Now, briefly, let's consider what is found in the ancient annals, legends, and history of Ireland. And we shall have the scene of Jeremiah's planting and the present location of lost Israel. The real ancient history of Ireland is very extensive, though colored with some legend. But with the facts of biblical history and prophecy in mind, one can easily sift out the legend from the true history in studying ancient Irish annals. Throwing out that which is obviously legendary, we glean from various histories of Ireland the following. Long prior to 700 B.C., a strong colony called Tuatha de Danann, the tribe of Dan, arrived in ships, drove out other tribes, and settled there. Later in the days of David, a colony of the line of Zerah arrived in Ireland from the Near East. Then in 569 B.C., date of Jeremiah's transplanting, an elderly white-haired patriarch, sometimes referred to as saint, came to Ireland. With him was the princess daughter of an eastern king and a companion called Simon Brack, spelled in different histories as Breck, B-R-E-C-K, Berich, B-E-R-E-C-H, Brock, B-R-A-C-H, or Burach, B-E-R-A-C-H. B-E-R-A-C-H. The princess had a Hebrew name, Tephi,
a pet name, her full name being Tea Tephi. Modern literature of those who recognize our national identity has confused this Tea Tephi, a daughter of Zedekiah, with an earlier Tea, a daughter of Ith, who lived in the days of David. This royal party included the son of the king of Ireland, who had been in Jerusalem at the time of the siege. There he had become acquainted with Tea Tephi. He married her shortly after 585, when the city fell. Their young son, now about 12 years of age, accompanied them to Ireland. Besides the royal family, Jeremiah brought with them some remarkable things, including a harp, an ark, and a wonderful stone called Leaphael, or Stone of Destiny. A peculiar coincidence? Is that Hebrew reads from right to left, while English reads from left to right? Read his name either way, and it is still Leaphael. Another strange coincidence, or is it just coincidence, is that many kings in the history of Ireland, Scotland, and England have been coronated sitting over this throne, including the present queen. The stone rests today in Westminster Abbey in London, and the coronation chair is built over and around it. A sign beside it labels it Jacob's Pillar Stone, Genesis 28, verse 18. The royal husband of the Hebrew princess T, was given the title Aramon upon ascending the throne of his father. This Aramon has usually been confused with a much earlier Gid the Haramon in David's day, who married his uncle Ith's daughter T. The son of this later king Haramon and Hebrew princess continued on the throne of Ireland, and the same dynasty continued unbroken through all the kings of Ireland, was overturned and transplanted again in Scotland, again overturned and moved to London, England, where this same dynasty continues today in the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. Another interesting fact is that the crown worn by the kings of the line of Haramon and the other sovereigns of ancient Ireland had 12 points. Queen Elizabeth on David's throne. I've just got to comment on this. Had 12 points like the 12 tribes. Queen Elizabeth on David's throne. In view of the linking together of biblical history, prophecy, and Irish history, can anyone deny that this Hebrew princess was the daughter of King Zedekiah of Judah, and therefore heir to the throne of David? That the aged patriarch was in fact Jeremiah, and his companion was Jeremiah's scribe or secretary, Baruch. That King Haramon was a descendant of Zerah, here married to the daughter of Pharez, healing the ancient breach. That when the throne of David was first overturned by Jeremiah, it was replanted in Ireland, later overturned a second time and replanted in Scotland, overturned a third time and planted in London. When Christ returns to earth to sit on that throne, he shall take over a live, existing throne, not a non-existent one. Luke 1, verse 32. And the British Commonwealth of Nations is the only company of nations in all Earth's history. Could we so exactly fulfill the specifications of the birthright and not be the birthright people? The United States expanded rapidly in national resources and wealth after 1800, but reached world dominance among nations later than the British Commonwealth. It became a giant world power by the end of World War I. The United States is Manasseh. From the prophetic blessings passed on by the dying Jacob, it is apparent that Ephraim and Manasseh were in a large measure to inherit the birthright jointly, to remain together for a long time, finally separating. In Genesis 48, Jacob first passed the birthright on to the two sons of Joseph jointly, speaking to them both together. Then finally he spoke of them separately. Manasseh was to become the single great nation, Ephraim the company of nations. And in his prophecy for these latter days, Jacob said, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. Genesis 49, verse 22. In other words, Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh jointly and together was to be a colonizing people in this latter day, their colonies branching out from the British Isles around the earth. Together, Ephraim and Manasseh grew into a multitude, then separated according to Jacob's prophetic blessing of Genesis 48. Our people have fulfilled this prophecy. But how can we be Manasseh when a large part of our people have come from many nations beside England? The answer is this. A large part of Manasseh remained with Ephraim until the separation of New England. But our forefathers were to be sifted through many nations, as corn through a sieve, yet not a grain to fall to the earth or be lost. Amos 9, verse 9. Our people did filter through many nations. Ephraim and much of Manasseh finally immigrated to England together, but many others of Manasseh who had filtered into and through other nations did not leave those other nations until they came as immigrants to the United States after the New England colony had become the separate nations. And I see that we left off the Y on until they came in the middle of that paragraph. So let's pause for just a brief moment. I'll put the Y there so it'll be there in your text here from now on. Okay. Now, this does not mean that all foreigners who have immigrated into this country are of the stock of Manasseh, but undoubtedly many are. Israel, however, always did absorb Gentiles who became Israelites through living in Israel's land and intermarrying. Thus, we've become known as the melting pot of the world. Instead of refuting our Manasseh ancestry, this fact actually confirms it. The proof that we are Manasseh is overwhelming. Manasseh was to separate from Ephraim and become the greatest, wealthiest single nation of Earth's history. We alone have fulfilled this prophecy. Manasseh was in fact a 13th tribe. There were 12 original tribes. Joseph was one of these 12. But when Joseph divided into 2 tribes and Manasseh separated into an independent nation, it became a 13th tribe. Manasseh and Ephraim were the two sons of Joseph, and Ephraim carried Joseph's name more than Manasseh did, but Manasseh did too there until we separated. Could it be a mere coincidence that it started as a nation with, Manasseh? Speaking of Manasseh, could it be a mere coincidence that Manasseh started as a nation with 13 colonies? But what about the other tribes of the so-called lost 10 tribes? While the birthright was Joseph's and its blessings have come to the British Commonwealth of Nations and the United States of America, yet the other 8 tribes of Israel were also God's chosen people. They too have been blessed with a good measure of material prosperity, but not the dominance of the birthright. We lack space for a detailed explanation of the specific identity of all these other tribes in the nations of our 20th century. Suffice it to say here that there is ample evidence that these other 8 tribes have descended into such northwestern European nations as Holland, Belgium, Denmark, northern France, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Sweden, Norway. The people of Iceland are also of Viking stock. The political boundaries of Europe as they exist today do not necessarily show lines of division between descendants of these original tribes of Israel. Join us again next time, brethren, friends, here on cogtv.org, Sabbath.tv, WorldWatch TV, when we pick up with the next chapter, chapter 10 of God's End Time Apostles' outstanding book, originally entitled The United States and the British Commonwealth in Prophecy, that we now are referring to as the United States and the United Kingdom as in prophecy, or the U.S. and the U.K. in prophecy. And I'm just scrolling back to where we'll have that chapter 9 on the screen as I close this out. The U.S. and U.K. in prophecy, chapter 9, Israel's new land. That's it for chapter 9. We'll see you in chapter 10. And brethren, that's it for the Friday night Bible study this Friday night, the 18th day of the 10th month on God's holy sacred calendar, the 5th day of January 2018 on the pagan Roman calendar. Let's go back to the Hebrew calendar for a moment. Being the 18th day of the 10th month means we are now just a little bit less than 3 months away from the next feast day. We'll talk more about that tomorrow morning. Actually, it's not tomorrow morning because it's the same day. We'll talk about that more in the morning. Yeah. And it's Friday night. It'll be Saturday morning on the pagan Roman calendar, but that's something that man did, naming days after pagan Roman gods and causing the day to change in the middle of the night at midnight. How utterly crazy is that? We come to accept it, but it's always been a great deal confusing in many ways. But God designed the day to end and then begin at sunset, a very natural occurrence. You can see it happening all around you. And so the day really changed at sunset earlier, a few hours earlier, and became the Sabbath. And, it's the, wait a minute. Let me see if I got something correct. Let me, I may have the Hebrew date. Considering that factor, I may be using the Hebrew date from the daytime before the Sabbath portion. Just a moment. I got something I really quickly can check that with, and I don't want to close out with leaving you with an error on my screen. Yeah, that 18th of the 10th month is for the day here as it was before sundown. Once the sun set, it's become the 19th day of the 10th month. It's, and short of what, for our purposes tonight, it's still just a few days less than 3 months. We're still in time, just a few days less than 3 months from the next feast day, the Passover, Passover memorial foot washing
service. So, and I'll correct the lower third in the morning, so it'll say the 19th, as it should have said tonight for Sabbath Eve. And then, of course, the Roman calendar date will change to the 6th in the morning. But it's still all the same day. It's still all the 19th day of the 10th month, a Sabbath, since sunset today. And, won't it be great, brethren, once Christ returns and we no longer have to cross-reference that attempted time-changing calendar, the pagan Roman calendar. We can simply, and we will simply go by this same Hebrew calendar we're using today. That is the one God instituted. That is the one that God will be using when Christ returns. That's the one we'll be checking the signs in the heavens by, even the new moons. And I'll bet you a dog's leg. Oops, I probably shouldn't bet you that. Let me see. Somebody's going to be mad at me if you think I'm going to cut off a dog's leg over a bet. No, but I'd win anyway. I wouldn't have to cut off the dog's leg. Well, I think I would. I was just going to say that I'll bet you. I'll bet you anything that after Christ returns, we're still going to be using the calculated calendar, because all of the evidence I can find, I don't know, I just got some of you out there possibly, most of you who watch me, I think are pretty you pretty much follow God's Spirit. You stay with what God taught us through his end-time apostle. You follow the instruction God gave us to all speak the same thing and all be of one mind, and that means to do that, we've got to follow the one God used to teach us everything through. To understand this jigsaw puzzle that the Bible is, but when we put it together, then we can see that, why it says this and it says that, and God gave us the putting together of that puzzle through his end-time apostle and servant Herbert Armstrong. We wouldn't have been able to put this together by ourselves without God directing and leading and guiding it in just the way that he did, and he did it in such a way. He did it to show who his servant is. But I was saying something, I hope I didn't totally lose the thought, that this is the 19th of the 10th month. We're going to be going by that Hebrew calendar, and I was just saying that there's a lot of evidence that, to me, shows that will still be used, that even though it was only revealed through Hillel to the public, that the Levites understood, or at least the high priest did, and handed it down from high priest to high priest. He understood how to calculate the calendar from the beginning back to the time of Levi, to Aaron and the Levites, and the Levitical priesthood, I'm trying to say, because God gave that to Moses and Aaron as an oracle, not to be written down, not at that time anyway, but as an oracle, telling them, here's when these things are, here's how to calculate it out, and then go watch for it. And when you see it, send the smoke signals that confirm it to everybody. But I'm keeping it so that the people don't have this information, so that they have to look to you. So that just like Revelation 1 says of who his end-time servants will be, he's going to show them to us through the truth he gives to us through those servants. He showed the people back then who his priests were, the Levitical priesthood, by keeping things that required the people to look to the Levitical priesthood to know and understand. That when the new moons came, they had to be verified by the priest. Priests knew how to calculate it, the rest of the people didn't. And then they would confirm it with the signs in the heavens and send the signs and say, hey, we saw it, here's the new moon, y'all keep looking to us, the Levitical priesthood, as God intended for it to be, and so that God would cause them to be recognized. If you go to Revelation, first chapter, first verse, where it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God the Father gave unto Jesus Christ, to show unto his servants. Now, everybody is not his servants, and there are levels of servants. And by showing unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass, He didn't give that to everybody. He gave us these things which must shortly come to pass by revealing them to us through his servant, to show us who his servant was. And one of the most primary things that reveals who God's end-time servant is the revealing in Revelation 17, verse 10, the revealing of the part of Revelation 17, verse 10 that says, and one is. You know, that verse says, and there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other's not yet come, and when he's come, he must continue a short space. You know, I really prefer to do this when I have live video camera, because I can then show you on screen the 5 that are fallen. I can show you the one that is Mussolini, who is between the fall of 1935 and the spring of 1945. And that was the prime time when God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong was broadcasting coast to coast in the United States and in other places too then. And out of Mexico, 100,000, 150,000 watts. And at that time, when it occurred, he was able to announce that Mussolini had become the 6th king, the one is. And God revealed that through Herbert Armstrong. And that was a tremendous revealing. And that was done through his servant, to show who his servants are, of things which must shortly come to pass. And the thing that must shortly come to pass that Mr. Armstrong would preach on about often was the fact that one is yet to come. That part of Revelation 17:10 that we are looking to in prophecy today to occur and happen. The 7th king to come as the beast who will kick off, who will open up the 5th seal and kick off round 3 of World War and fulfill Ezekiel 6 verse 6, a prophecy to modern day Joseph, Ephraim in the United Kingdom, Manasseh in the United States, that if you don't repent, all of your cities will be laid waste. And God has inspired his end-time prophet Herbert W. Armstrong to tell us one of the first things the beast will do is fulfill Ezekiel 6:6. He will blow up all the cities of the United Kingdom, probably using missiles from both the United Kingdom and the United States. Missiles are nuclear warheads anyway. Maybe they'll put them on their own missiles. And first of all, they'll blow up all the cities of the United States, and then later that same day or the next day, especially since we're hours later on the clock over here, they'll blow up all the cities of the United States. They'll be doing it as an intended surprise attack. They will not announce that we're going to blow you and smoke you off the earth. You know, the way the United States made threats against North Korea. There probably not a word of it will be breathed. It'll be an intended surprise attack. The lid on that will be kept so tight, anybody that breathes it will be shot right in the head before they can get their mouth open. Anybody who looks like they're going to breathe it, they'll have an SS like, incredible SS like you won't believe. Hey, I see we accidentally hitting a microphone wire that needs to be soldered. But brethren, let me go ahead, and since we signed on late, I'm going to go ahead and sign off now for this Friday night Bible study. We'll plan to be back in the morning daytime hours of the Sabbath with the AM service to the United States and the PM service to the United Kingdom. Planned starting time will be 7:30 a.m. Central. 7:30 a.m. Pacific. I don't expect any of you on the Pacific Coast to be up for that, or we actually start here from the Central Time Zone at 9:30 a.m. That's 10:30 on the East Coast. Probably an outstanding time for East Coast people for a morning service. And that same time happens to work out to be 2:30 p.m. Well, it didn't just happen. We planned it that way. So it would be 2:30 in the afternoon in the UK. As many of you asked, Stephen, please get the live stream on while the Sabbath is still, before the sun sets. Well before the sun sets on the Sabbath. And 2:30 p.m. was the same time that God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong would start the services at headquarters. The headquarters congregation held their services on the Sabbath at 2:30 p.m. In Pasadena. And so you people in the UK, you've got headquarters time working for you there. We also had an AM service. A lot of the employees would be assigned to the AM service and attend there. That was at the headquarters, auditorium. But it was, and so and Mr. Armstrong would often tune in to that AM service out of the auditorium. He'd watch it from his home because, we had television cameras in the auditorium. And he'd often refer in the afternoon to either the sermonette or the sermon that was given that morning. And there were some of us crazy people, maybe I shouldn't, more zealous people who would attend both. We were allowed to do that as long as we didn't stir up any, just kind of keep quiet about it. We were allowed to attend both the AM and the PM services. I mean, we were assigned to the PM congregation, but we were allowed to attend the smaller seats, plenty of seats open AM congregation with them if we wanted to get up and do that. And I would do that every Sabbath. Mr. Armstrong was tuning in on it. I'd be there myself in person listening. And so we have 10:30 a.m. for you people on the East Coast. Those of you in the Mountain Time, which a lot of times they don't do daylight savings, so they keep the same time as Pacific time for a good part of the year. But you people on the Pacific Coast are able to watch it on demand at any time you choose later from the archive. Or you can, even while you're still in bed or if you're already up, sitting at your dinner table, turn on the internet and watch us live if you want. What we plan to do in the morning until we finish off this entire book, we got about, there's 14 chapters. We've just gone through 9, so we got 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We have 5 more chapters to go. We plan on going through chapter 10. Maybe we can even get through 2 chapters tomorrow. We'll go through either chapter 10 or chapters 10 and 11 tomorrow during the daytime. Brethren, thanks for joining me for this Friday night Bible study. I'm going to wish you a good night's sleep now. Get some good thank yous and prayers into our Creator. And I'm going to wish you a good night, good Friday, good Sabbath Eve. And God willing, those of you who rejoin us, we'll see you mañana in the morning, daytime. Shabbat Shalom. Stephen Gilbreath saying, Happy Sabbath. Good night, everyone.